Testing 1 2. Hopefully, give me a second here. Hopefully I can get this working. You guys should be able to hear me. Oh, there we go. Mute. Testing. Okay, this should be good. Quick stream today. Well, to start the day. So I'll tell you a little story. This stream is going to be kind of how it's made for this piece Luna that I'm currently about to mint for my pass. In fact, I'm going to probably just tweet this right now because this one is really interesting. So I'm just going to copy this and then I'll say, showing how this is made right now. I think if you retweet your own stuff, it doesn't, like, it just probably buries it, but whatever. Okay, so I don't have a stream for this one, and here's kind of why. I'll walk you through it really quick, and then I'll just show you how I ended up doing this, because this was meant to be like, I was like, okay, I have this moon I already made. I can get this done in an hour. I'll have another piece. This is going to be awesome. And I ended up spending like 12 hours on this thing. And it seems so stupid. And, you know, part of it is a lack of probably knowledge on the Photoshop compositing side. But I ran into like the craziest issues doing this. So let me just show you what it is. So this is the last piece. This is number 11. This one's called Dream Big. So it's this animation. You can see it kind of comes through here. This is the balcony from 10. So we built a balcony in 10, did a shot overlooking New York City. Then on number 11, we did this animation of it going up to the telescope. And right here, it zooms in and it basically cuts. So this is the first part of it. And it's probably going to be too tough to render this, but you can see it. Here, let me go grab the actual link and I'll show you on the stream, and then I'll show you what we did. So manifold.app/c/001. I think it should be 01. What did I say? 11? Maybe not. 10. Did I just do the URL wrong? I've been messing up the URLs. Okay, I don't know where this one is. Damn. Okay, let's see if this runs. Yeah, so it kind of runs. You can see it on the left, right? Just goes through, goes to the telescope, and there's the moon, and then it looks in, okay? And then if we go over to the second part of this, which was called, it's just called Dream Big Moon, and we pop over to this one, I modeled the moon, and it was very, very simple. I didn't put a lot into it. I grabbed a displacement texture and a color texture. I put it in the sky. I set the camera on it. I put the background as sort of just stars, I think. If I remember right, I think it was just, dark background. Put the shadow in, and I animated a little bit of camera shake. Now, on the final piece, what I ended up doing was bringing in to DaVinci Resolve. I added this kind of like camera blur effect. So it starts out blurred, and then it like zooms in, focuses, and then it out of focus, and then it takes a shot. So this is sort of the final video that you see. And it looked really good, and I was very happy with it. But I was like, man, this moon is really cool. And when I had brought it in originally with the background, with like an actual full background, I was like, man, this looks so good. Like, I really, really would love to use this. But what happened is that when you animate the camera shake, it ends up looking wrong. Like, the perspective goes off. It doesn't look right because the background doesn't blur. There's a bunch of reasons. It just doesn't look good. So I was like, all right, I'm going to make a still render of the moon, but I'm going to do it in like a super high quality, because I thought, hey, it'd be cool. There's really good high quality like moon data out there for images and displacement. Hey, let's do that because it's going to look really awesome as a still render. So this is my brilliant idea. So I went in and I brought the moon over and I started to put it into a scene. I'll show you this in a second. So this is loading up here on the left. And it was really simple. To get to that was nothing. It was sort of, hey, we'll put the background in. I've got a really good space background. It's high quality. We'll set the sun position. The hardest part was getting the moon position exactly right. So the way that it's locked in the northern hemisphere. And then I went to NASA and I got data on where the shadow was last night. So I was able to get the shadow here. And I kind of set the amount of light coming from our sun and the amount of light coming from the environment, which creates that sort of, shadow effect. And you can change, the moon position. I mean, it's really, really good. But it was really easy, I think, to get to this spot. And then I thought, okay, this is going to be so easy. I'm just going to render this thing out and away we go. But the thing that really sold the effect when I was looking at some references and I was looking at some photographs where if you just photograph the moon, you're really going to get black sky with the moon. You can get a good quality photo of the moon, but you're going to get black sky because the moon is so bright that your exposure between the moon and the stars, you're never going to get stars in your shot. So this is what people do, right? This is a common, these some very, very popular images. I think this one made the cover of a whole bunch of places because it was like 200 megapixels. It was super high res. I don't know if these ones, probably not high res that I brought in, but very high res photo. Obviously they did some stuff with the color and, you can see stars in the background and you can see the glow off the moon. Well, that's compositing in Photoshop. They just added some blur and bloom, and then they put the stars in the background, which they probably took, a similar shot at night, and they composite it all together. And the effect is the moon kind of like popping off the background, really powerful. You get like the feeling of the brightness off the moon. Like it's just a cool effect. And every time I see a moon photo like this, I'm like, damn, that's so nice. I want to replicate that. So I was like, all right, I can do this in 3D because you can add bloom to the image. And, Blender has a pretty decent bloom setup. I don't know if I can really show this well, but basically I was like, okay, I can add that glare in the compositor and I can kind of set it all up. The problem that happened that is like you just don't anticipate is a bunch of things. One, it's really hard to get this level of glare off of the moon without affecting the quality of the textures. That's why compositing works, because you can blur out, a beautiful bright area behind and you can maintain the perfect texture and resolution of these images. And these are really high quality. Like I'm at, I don't even know what resolution. It's massive. It's like 15,000 by something. So you can see, you can zoom into this image and you can really get like some pretty crazy quality aspects of the moon. And in fact, probably in a future episode, I'm going to probably put the camera down here and, we'll do some cool stuff like this. Like look at the quality of that. And this is probably not even set up properly in the render, but you can see like the actual craters and everything in the moon. It's wild and it's real data. So we have the ability to go anywhere on this moon and we can, do whatever we want with it now, which is really cool to have. The problem is you want to keep that, maintain that quality, but create the bloom. So you have to composite. So I'm like, okay, no problem. We'll composite this. So I thought, okay, how do I want to do it? And the thought that came to my head was, let's get a glare moon, we'll call it, like basically this, which was going to be emitting light, very bright light from behind the moon. And what you can do with this is if you go to I think the compositor, let's see. That's probably the way that I have it set up. I think I would have to put, don't want to necessarily mess this up for the demo, but you have to trust me. You can put, you can take, hold on. Let's just drop it in here. And we'll drop this into our viewer. This should do it. Maybe here. Can't remember which one shows. Yeah, that's working, but now you have like just a massive have to like go and change a bunch of stuff to actually make this work. Shader, object, home. Okay, I think this shows the idea, right? So you get the moon behind that does the bright, and you kind of tune in your compositing to make sure that this one is bright, and then you hide it behind the other moon, you render that out, and then you put the other moon on top and you have a glow. This is the basic idea. And like last night I was working on it, and it was just like, no matter what I did in Photoshop, I couldn't get the proper glare effect. So then I started going down this path of like, okay, I can do this in Photoshop. Photoshop is meant for this, but I'm not a Photoshop expert. So I start like exporting the stuff into Photoshop, and I want to export it like super high res. So I'm like going in and I'm manually trying to add the glare and the bloom, and it just doesn't look the same as it does in the render. So then I go back to the render. I'm like, hey, let's try to get this thing like dialed in without it, So I'm like, okay, like I'll put the glow behind, I'll put the moon in front, and we'll do the whole thing. Anyway, the long story short is I ended up going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I finally was like, all right, I'm going to just do this in super low res to get it right. And then once I get it right, I'll crank it up to 8K because that's what I wanted, and I'll render it out. So last night I get the whole thing perfectly lined up in like 1K. It looks great. I'm like, this is right out of, like, I don't even have to edit this. Put it in Lightroom maybe, but just right out of render, right out of a Blender, which is sweet, and I'll have it done. So I render it out, looks great. And then I crank it up to 8K and I render it. I'm like, all right, this is going to be good. And I leave it for a couple hours, I think. Or no, I think I went to bed. Yeah, I went to bed and then I got up to check it, and there's no glare. It was just sort of like this flat moon texture that just looks like this without any kind of background behind it. I was like, this doesn't make sense. So I'm like researching and looking. It turns out that the way that the glare node works in Blender is it works on like a pixel basis. So if you have a low res image, it'll blur out, say you set the glare size. So like, let's go to compositing. So you go into your compositor and you bring the image in and you set the glare size to 9, which is the max. Even says like not actual size, relative to initial size of the bright areas of the pixels. So it's like, okay, this should work. No, it doesn't interpret the final resolution of the image. So when you do it at like super high res, that pixel glare of 9 does nothing. It just basically is this like a little tiny high resolution glare that if you zoom in super close looks good, but doesn't actually do the effect that you want, which is the whole thing going glaring. So then I'm like, okay, you try, people are like add multiple glare nodes and then add a transform. So I'm watching tutorials, I'm trying to do it. Anyway, I think this is just like, I think this is a bit of a lesson and a bit of a insight into why I struggle so much with the 3D stuff, because as soon as you go outside of your comfort zone, if I was like, hey, I'm really comfortable with modeling and setting up, little stage lighting and doing animation, like that's my thing. There's no unknowns there. You're crafting, you're perfecting your craft, you're getting better, but you're really limited in, you're inside of this box of this is the technique that I use. I don't need to really learn and grow beyond this. My path, which right or wrong, has been to constantly like try new things, learn new things. I'm trying to figure out like a little bit of where my style is, my genre, and where I kind of fit, but also trying to be as well-rounded as possible so I can kind of create anything that I imagine in my head. I can bring it to life in a scene, whether it's animated, not animated, an Unreal Engine or not. It uses, Photoshop and Lightroom, or it's compositing. I mean, modeling things myself, using real world data, lighting, big scenes, small scenes. I've kind of gone everywhere. And the upside is that it creates like a lot of flexibility in the work, because I don't have to be like, well, I don't know how to do that. That's outside of my comfort zone. I can go, okay, I think I can do that. I've done that before, but maybe not quite the same. Maybe I can learn this, learn that. I'll figure it out. That's the cool part. The downside is you're always at the edge and you're always running into issues and you're always looking for like solutions. And those solutions aren't obvious. They're not always like, here's the exact way to do this. I found this with the 3D rendered landscapes. I found this with real world data. There's just not like here's someone who has solved all these problems teaching you exactly what to do. Now, I hope one day that I can be that person that can kind of guide people through, I think potentially the real world data side of this is where I like really want to sit. So how to bring in 3D scans, photogrammetry, LiDAR, how to scan scenes with using like Gaussian splatting or NERF, how to create real landscapes from terrain data, radar data, LiDAR, how to texture mountains and landscapes, how to texture buildings, how to sort of build up the real world. And then once you do that, add your own twist and your spin to it. I think that's where I ultimately will be and what I'll ultimately want to help teach to people. But the path to get there is it just sometimes you really bang your head against the wall with certain things that you do. So the end result was I rendered this out in 8K with 3 layers. So a background layer, a glare layer, and the actual moon with the shadow. And I rendered it out at 8K. I brought it all into Photoshop. And, this is probably a very messy Photoshop setup. Well, it is, I'm sure. But I've already ranted about my hatred for Photoshop for quite a while. But you can see if I kind of start to get rid of the layers, go all the way down, just to kind of show this. I missed one. So I started with this background layer, which has everything but the moon cut out. And then I adjusted the brightness and contrast. I added this first emission layer, which is basically the emission that I brought in from Blender. And I was just going to see if it actually is the way so I think this one gets crazy. Maybe not. Yeah, it's like I think this one is me bringing in just the emission, and then I'm blurring it, adjusting the opacity, moving it around, skewing it, all to make this sort of like somewhat organic light leak coming from the actual moon. So you can see it there. It's heavier on this side. It's lighter on this side. It kind of still pops off. It looks like it's almost like clouds coming through. And it's, combination of the fact that I do have a background that has some sort of like nebula cloud. And then, I'm brightening up the pixels with merging it with the blur, and the whole thing ends up kind of creating this effect where the shadow is, or the brightness is seemingly coming out from this side. And then I added like another layer. Actually, this one I didn't use this layer, which adds it even more kind of a brighter part just outside of the edge. And then a third one, which adds, even more brightness through here. And then I think we composited it in the clean moon from here. Can't remember if it was this one or this one. I think they're the same. And then I just made some slight changes to the hue saturation. So the end result was this. It's an 8K image. It is, well, this one's showing as 9K, but not 9K for this. So it's an 8K image. It's perfectly square. So it can be cropped to Instagram crop. It can be cropped to a 16:9. It can be cropped to, I guess, 9:16. I don't know if you can hit that. Of course, Photoshop would not have, why would Photoshop have a, reverse these, so you can crop it to your phone background. So what I'm going to do here in a bit is I'm going to mint it, and I'm going to see if I'm either going to mint it as an 8K image directly, which, I understand obviously people can go get it, but for my collectors, You'll be able to download it, from Arweave, and you'll be able to crop it to whatever dimensions you want. So you'll be able to use it as background for your computer, background for your phone, for iPads, whatever you want. But I might look into, there's a technique by Transient Labs where they actually have it so you have all the images in the metadata, and then you upload them like lower res, and then you can, choose in the metadata between each of them. But ultimately, this is going to be minted here in a bit. And I just didn't stream it because honestly, it was like just messing around with like render, weight, change the composite layer, weight, Photoshop weight, super intensive on the computer. The stream was just going to crash. So I just decided to get it done and then come back here and explain the process. So you can see how heavy this is. It's just to crop it. It's massive. The file is huge. But yeah, ultimately this is the moon. I think we're going to call it Luna. It's the same moon exactly from the render, although I changed the shadow. And it has the actual moon data from last night. So November 11th on the Northern Hemisphere. And I have the ability, obviously, to change it to a full moon, whatever we want. Which is cool because it's nice to have this technique at least done. And now I can save out this image and I can use it in future renders. In fact, I may end up today on the stream dropping it behind the condo building that I have and then doing like a super zoomed in shot, of the condo with the moon in the background. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I haven't decided, maybe that or like a 360 drone shot with the moon in the background as well. So that's Luna. That's how it's made. I'm just going to save this video and people can watch it on YouTube, but there it is. So thanks for joining, and I'll be back later on today